Hey everyone, my name's Stu. I'm a learning designer in the Faculty of Education at UBC. So I'm going to talk about presence today. In previous videos I've talked about time, and in the next video I'll talk about measurement. So presence in an online course and what that means. Now, common question is, if you're new to online teaching, is how can you actually establish a learning community in an online course? In a face-to-face course, that is very, very simple. You simply show up to the classroom and you have your students talk to each other. It's very, very simple. So to answer this question, let's just have a look at first what a face-to-face class looks like. So in a face-to-face lecture, you've usually got this sort of setup with the instructor at the front of the room giving the lecture. The students are in rows. There can be active learning activities, a couple of think, pair, shares, different activities going on there. In a seminar, it looks a little bit different there, smaller amount of students, and then it's more discussion-based, like round table discussions. Now, in an online course, it looks a little bit different still. Typically what you've got is the students in this online space together, collaborating, working on activities either independently or together, and the instructor just sort of sits off to the side facilitating all of this and observing the students, seeing how they're doing. Sometimes the instructor can actually stand at the front again like that in the case of maybe an online lecture, or if they're recording a lecture and then putting that up online. This is sort of the perception from the students. Other times the instructor can actually go into these discussions or activities and actually participate with the students and embed themselves sort of in that learning community as well. And we also need to account for the one-on-one activities that instructors have with students, whether that's responding to individual emails, having virtual office hours, chatting with students, things like that. But for the most part, instructors sort of do sit off to the side like this. And then the question becomes, well, how do we actually establish presence as an instructor if we are not at the front of the room, so to speak? A good way to do this right off the bat is just to show your face however you can do that. So in this video, you can see my face, and it does make a difference. If I remove my face from this video, you might not get the same feel as to how I'm speaking to you or how I'm presenting materials, things like that. So yeah, if you can upload a picture of yourself and add that to the syllabus, that's great. Better yet, if you can do short video recordings to introduce yourself to the class at the beginning of the class or the course, that would be great. A lot of instructors, what they do is every week they'll post a new announcement to the course. And you can do this by text, or it's even better if you can do just a short video, maybe recapping the previous week and telling the students about what they'll be doing in this week. So that is a really, really important thing, just to show your face, to establish what's called instructor presence. So the students know that you are there, that you're a human being and you're in that space online with them, and that they can ask you questions and all of this. Another thing that is very important is just to ask your students to do the same. Of course, this is only if they're comfortable doing so. So maybe in an introductory activity, they can post a picture of themselves on a hike or like on their boat or something like that. Another thing you can do is ask the students to make short videos of themselves. Depending on the platform you're using, they might be able to just record it in their browser or on their phones. It's really up to you. But it is important to consider that if students aren't comfortable doing this, they don't have to. Now, next up, as far as social presence goes, that ties into the students getting to know each other and learning about each other as they would in the face-to-face classroom. We need to provide options for communication. If there's really only email within the course, nobody's really talking to each other, right? So we need to provide different options for communication so that students can work together, learn from each other, learn from the instructor, or collaborate. So that means maybe using discussions, blogs, text chat, video chat, web conference, any number of tools that are available to us within our learning ecosystem, it's called, and the technologies that you're comfortable using, feel free to do so. It goes a long way as far as establishing that you are all in a learning community. Next up, let's talk about cognitive presence, because in an online course, it might be that the students are reading materials, watching videos, but the depth at which they are actually engaging with that material can differ quite a bit. So it's important here to just give your students problems to solve, not really questions to answer. So let me illustrate this. So we have an activity where students are engaging in some sort of discourse, but in many online courses, what we see is the prompt that is given to students or the activity that they're being given might just have a factual answer. So it's usually based on a reading, right? You would say, read chapter 2 of this textbook, and then there's an activity. So if the prompt is, let's say, read chapter 2 by Miller, what does Miller say about the limitations of memory? Typically, a question like that may only have one answer. So what you would have in that discussion or in that activity is students just repeating the same answer again and again and again. And discourse usually doesn't work like this. People just don't say the same thing again and again and again. It's very common in online courses to ask students to actually engage in conversation and reply. But if all it is just an answer to a single question that is kind of a fact-based answer, it's very hard for them to have a conversation around that. All they can say is, yes, I agree, you're right. And what you get is this representation here. You get a whole bunch of the same answer and a whole bunch of responses. And it's basically a bunch of mini conversations going back and forth. But that's not really how discourse works in the face-to-face environment. This is how it usually works in a face-to-face environment. You've got all of these ideas being thrown around and then potential solutions. So online, it's very important to set up activities such that the students will collaborate with each other to find solutions to a problem. So an example here might be to give them a case study and that maybe has a controversial topic associated with it, and you can ask them, well, what would your solution to this be? There's no correct answer here, but if they read all of the learning materials, if they watched the videos that you gave them, if they attended your online lecture, then they should be able to participate in this activity and prove that they learned something. Now, for online discourse, if you're doing discussions, if you're doing text-based discourse, it's very important to think about this, that you don't actually have to respond to every student post. If you want to, that's great, but it is not expected at all when you're teaching online. If you're setting up good activities where the students are sort of organically talking to each other, the only point at which you actually need to participate is to jump in and encourage further reading on a specific topic. Maybe you'll give them an article to have a look at, or you might steer them back on course if they are digressing a little bit. But for the most part, you can skim through the student posts, and if anybody's off track, you can bring them back on track. Or if you want to commend a post or something like that, you can definitely do that. But it's definitely not expected that you respond to every single student. And the last point here is just to model what good discourse is for your class. If you expect your students to be very formal in their discourse and basically write essay answers for every discussion with citations, then you can model that. It is actually recommended to be a little bit more informal with your students online, just simply because that kind of models a conversation that would happen in the real world. When we're in a face-to-face classroom, we're typically not saying like a 3-minute speech and then giving citations or references at the end of that speech and then going in a circle and doing that and not talking to each other. We're typically just having short conversations. We're saying, yeah, that's a great idea, or what about this, or something like that. So it's important for you as the instructor to actually model the type of discourse that you want to see your students engaging with in the course. So finally, again, comes back to your learning outcomes. Try to consider those. Again, might be not the same as your face-to-face course, so there might be adaptations you need to make or alternatives that you need to implement. But going back to what your students should be learning and experiencing should be what you're considering here. And again, if you are stumped or stressed about any of this transition, just know that there are folks around, instructional designers, whether at your department or institution, or even online, or your fellow instructors. They're in this with you as well. So feel free to ask questions and feel free to engage. Thanks for watching. So in the next video, I'm just going to talk about measurement and what that means online.